I've just been handed this. This is hot off the presses. The Washington Post, 7:01 p.m., posting a story with the headline, Russian ambassador told Moscow that Kushner wanted secret communications channel with Kremlin. The idea here that Kushner, Russia's ambassador to Washington, discussing the possibility of setting up a secret and secure communications channel between the Trump transition team and the Kremlin, using Russian diplomatic facilities in an apparent move to shield their pre-inauguration discussions from monitoring, according to U.S. officials briefed on intelligence reports. That's from this report. Again, the Washington Post just breaking this. Ruth Marcus, you're with the Washington Post. I'm just trying to get up to speed. I've been handed this. Tell our viewers what you know about this.
Well, from what I understand of the story, it's exactly as you said it, and it answers the question that has been out there since the reporting from yesterday or the day before. If Jared Kushner is a subject of investigation, what exactly is being investigated? It appears there is this unusual sounding request for some kind of back-channel communication with the Russians during the transition. We don't know what happened. We don't know what the reasons were for that, but it certainly looks like something very unusual, and it kind of underscores the issue of how badly, really, the White House does need some kind of damage control team there. But the way it's been described, you can't have some of the people who might have been contributing to the damage running the damage control team. So they're going to need to bring in a set of lawyers and a set of communications professionals whose sole and only job is to deal with the congressional investigation and the special counsel investigation and the press inquiries that are going to come. You sort of laid out how much they've been coming out this week, even while the president is away, so that people like Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner can go about doing all the other business that White Houses are supposed to do. This latest Washington Post story is just another example of a really deepening headache, deepening problem for the White House, certainly political, if not legal.
Just a few more details. Again, I'm learning of this along with everybody else out there right now, but a few more details from this article, again, breaking in the Washington Post right now, saying that on December 1st or 2nd, again, this was in the transition period at Trump Tower. This is when Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, he reported to his superiors in Moscow that at a meeting at Trump Tower that day, Jared Kushner made this proposal. That meeting, according to the Washington Post here, was also attended by Michael Flynn. Of course, Flynn went on to become briefly President Trump's national security advisor. Michael Flynn now under investigation, the source of quite a bit of controversy on his own. The Post also reporting here that the White House disclosed the fact of that December meeting in March and played down its significance. Reading from the article here, people familiar with the matter say the FBI now considers the encounter, as well as another meeting Kushner had with a Russian banker, to be of investigative interest. Congressman, your reaction to what you're learning so far?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. The FBI, when they do their investigation, things come uncovered, and then they investigate. And, you know, when you see a president who allows the Russians, the Russian foreign minister, the Russian ambassador, and he's telling them in the White House confidential and secret information, and then seems to goes on a trip, and he talks to individuals who are our allies in NATO, and says things that are insulting to them that only helps Russia. And then you see the individuals of, whether it's Flynn, whether it's the Attorney General Sessions, whether it's son-in-law, all with the surroundings of trying to deal with Russia. He's not running from that. Then there's something that is there, and that's why I am glad we have a special prosecutor who will take his time and uncover and look at every piece of evidence and make a judgment as to what is or is not there. This doesn't surprise me, though, just by looking at all of the individuals that has surrounded Trump and just what took place in the White House just a week ago.
Again, the headline here, Russian ambassador told Moscow that Kushner wanted secret communications channel with the Kremlin. And Ken Vogel, also to read further in this article here, in terms of the motivation here, Jared Kushner, according to the Post here, told the Russians that this was it would be politically sensitive if there were to be any kind of public meetings between the two sides. He wanted to be able to communicate, I guess, candidly, I guess, freely, without the public learning of it. What is your read on this situation?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly makes sense for his motivation. We don't have to look a whole lot further than what we're talking about right now to see the political sensitivity of it. Let's not forget these communications occurred through channels that were not secure, and that's the reason why we know about them, because the NSA and some of the officials who were in the U.S. intelligence community who are monitoring Russian communications between Russian diplomats and officials with any number of people picked up some of these communications with Trump folks, ended up leaking it out. Maybe if Jared Kushner and Kislyak had gotten their way and they had set up a secure method of communications, the NSA would not have been able to have gotten a hold of those communications, and we might not know that General Flynn talked with Ambassador Kislyak about the sanctions before taking office. It's also important to point out here, as we have done, as we've covered this along the way, that it would not necessarily on its face be illegal or even problematic for an incoming administration to establish lines of communication with foreign governments and foreign powers, provided they weren't trying to do diplomacy outside of the current administration, which at that point was President Obama's.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth, just thinking about this right now, and this has been true, I think, with so many of the controversies and the revelations about this administration, especially as it relates to Russia. You could, on the surface, provide a number of different interpretations here, some incredibly sinister and nefarious. You could say, hey, look, Russia was trying to interfere with the election. They were trying to help Donald Trump. Now here's the Trump team in its transition trying to set up some sort of secret communication channel with them. Maybe that suggests some kind of collusion. That would be the sinister interpretation. You could also say, hey, Donald Trump talked in the campaign about having closer relations with Russia, a different kind of relationship with Russia. The controversy over the election was in the air. Maybe they just didn't want to have the public controversy over this. There's all the talk about business entanglements. There's so many different ways, at least potentially, to interpret stories like this.
Sure, and we are nowhere near we are still at the beginning of this story. To add to the potentially sinister things, we also know that Jared Kushner met with a Russian state-owned bank around the same time. So is there a connection between those meetings? There are some financial ties between the Kushner organization and Russian banks. Those are things that, could be problematic, could be not problematic, but definitely need to be looked into. At the same time, you do have to ask, given all of the stuff that was going on with complaints about Russian involvement in the election, why would you do something that has the potential appearance of sinisterness? It's at the very least incredibly dumb.
No,
Congressman.
the only thing that I want to add is, here's what we do know. Because all of our investigative agencies, 17 of them, said Russia did play a role in this election. That's a fact. And at the same time, we know that then candidate Trump said, Russia, whatever you're doing, he said it publicly, he didn't hide it, continue to do what you're doing. That's a fact. It is also a fact that, that Flynn, Sessions lied when they were filling out their applications to be classified, to get classified information. We know that Sessions lied when he went before the Senate Confirmation Committee. We know that they have tried to hide at every step any kind of dialogue and conversation they've had with Russia. Those are facts. That's not something that we have to guess at.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.